Assalamu alaikum. We're joined today by the lovely Rula Jamal, who is the co-director of the Palestinian Institute of Public Diplomacy. She is also a Palestinian human rights advocate based out of the West Bank, Ramallah, which we would like to call the occupied Palestinian territories. And thank you for taking time out. Unfortunately, you've been stranded in Sweden. Would you like to tell us about that? And we'd hope we'd meet you under better circumstances, but unfortunately, this is how we meet the first time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And also, I would like to take a moment to commemorate and to remember the lives of the over the 12,000 Palestinians who have been killed by the Israeli occupation so far since the beginning of November, basically the 7th of October. We will remember you, and all of these mattered, and all of these people were the entire world for other people. We will not forget. The reason why I am in Sweden is because at the beginning of October I was going out for work in the region, and then on the 7th of October the attack on Gaza started, and the entire borders were closed. Basically, Palestinians who are living in the West Bank, they have one only way of getting out from the West Bank to the world. It's via Jordan, because Palestinians are not allowed to use the airport under Israeli apartheid rules. And therefore, I went to Jordan, and then there was a closure. So I couldn't go back, but hopefully we foresee that hopefully this will end soon, and I could go back to Palestine.
Inshallah, we'd like to see you back at your house and your home with your people. The situation right now, as a human rights advocate, as somebody who is involved with activism on the ground, what is the situation like from your sources on ground in Gaza? I mean, you mentioned the 12,000 dead as of now, unfortunately, but what are the actual human conditions on ground right now?
Well, I would say the inhuman conditions. There is nothing normal in Gaza. The humanitarian situation in Gaza, even before the vicious attack on Gaza and the ongoing bombardment on an extremely high scale, was already in a very dire situation in Gaza. The infrastructure was in a very, very bad situation. Now, after the intensive bombardment, also the infrastructure is terrible. The situation in Gaza is one of the most terrible situations in the entire world. It is one of the most dense areas in the entire world. We are talking about almost 2 million people living in a very, very small geographical area. And it has been living under blockade, which means that entire closure from the land, from the air, from the sea, controlled by the Israeli military occupation, and unfortunately also closed by its borders to Egypt, through Egypt, by the Egyptian government as well, which means that this blockade has created the situation of extreme conditions for the people living there. And since the 7th of October, the entire situation has become extremely worse. And after the cut of fuel, electricity, food, and water, the situation in Gaza is unlivable, and this is something that has been reported by the UN. It has been reported by international organizations. We're hearing maydays coming out from Gaza. We have seen several communication blackouts. Imagine a place with no water, with no electricity, with no fuel for hospitals. There's about 36 hospitals in Gaza over 24 are now out of service entirely. And that is because there is no fuel. And without electricity, there is no clinical or medical institution that can operate. And so the situation in Gaza is a literal hell. It is a dystopia that we never even thought would come to that level, especially that it is under the watch of the entire world. This is the most documented, live streamed genocide and crimes that are taking place in modern history in front of the eyes of the entire humanity. And this is what is the most incredible situation we are living in. So Gaza situation is just unbelievable. Bakeries have been bombed. So and all of these atrocities against Gaza and the measures are very, very much a very clear evidence on the intention to actually starve the people of Gaza and a slow death for the people of Gaza, in addition to the extreme bombardment of hospitals, of schools, of civilian areas, of protected areas, mosques, churches, infrastructure. Everything is being totally destroyed, and that is very, very clear. The reason is to destroy entirely the entire Gaza area, and to kill as many civilians as possible.
Two very fascinating things that you brought up there. Number one, that it's as cynical as we can be. It's a genocide and an ethnic cleansing operation like no other. But the unique aspect about this, especially after the Iraq war, which was the so-called internationally televised war, this one is documented like no other genocide, like no other ethnic cleansing operation. Live streaming, Instagram, the X, formerly known as Twitter, billions, not millions, billions of people around the world have had some access, visual, auditory, maybe an article, an image, a picture. Everybody and their mothers has seen something about the exact situation in Gaza right now. And there's something desensitizing about everyone watching this and then, scrolling forward and moving on with their day, because you have people like Mu'taz and you have Blistia and all these young children, and they're kids. These are college-going kids who should not be doing this. You see their videos, and then when you scroll up, unfortunately, the algorithm works in a way where the next thing is a meme. It's a joke. It's a funny video. It's something from... it's almost akin to voyeurism, what's happening right now. Do you think that this has been a bane or a boon? Do you think people are being desensitized to the violence in Gaza? Or do you think they're being galvanized? Are they being riled up? Do they want to now end this violence that is being done with their tax dollars potentially, with their names potentially, or even with the stamp of humanity or the global community potentially?
Yeah, well, I think it differs. It depends on where you are in the world. The global South and people of color and people of struggle have much more to relate to in relation to colonization, in relation to freedom, struggles for liberation. And so in those areas, we see a very different scale of solidarity, a scale of action, a scale of anger, a way to try to actually channel this anger into proper action that is not just, sitting and looking at the news and, as you said, moving on. Now, in other places around the world, and we need to also differentiate there, the West has proven yet again, of course, that they're extremely complicit and they are part of what is happening in Palestine, including war crimes and crimes against humanity. They are complicit. They are aiding and abetting, and this is not new. But to be to that extreme is actually a little bit surprising, because it's also incriminating. However, when we look at the people in the West and in Europe, we also see a certain movement, but we also see it being on to a large extent also coming from people with different backgrounds and that are trying to move. We are seeing extremely huge demonstrations in different countries around the world, including one of the biggest in the UK, which was about 1 million participants, and that is huge. That tells you something about the world and how it's moving. But also specifically Great Britain, it has a specific history with the initiation of this colonization situation that Palestinians are under. So I think in that specific situation, we're talking about full complicity and continuation of support to the Israeli occupation and to the Israeli colonial project. So we should definitely differentiate between states and their regimes and what is happening on the ground. And it is also important to know that the Palestinian cause has in past years been a little bit away from mainstream, despite the fact that ongoing atrocities were taking place in Palestine. They have been taking place in Palestine since 1948. So the Nakba actually never ended. What we say is that there is an ongoing Nakba. And why do we say that? We say that because the ethnic cleansing, which means the entire ideology of actually displacing Palestinians to replace them with Jewish people and create a Jewish-only state, is and has been the entire project of the Zionist movement. And this did not stop, because they have not yet achieved that goal. They are trying to achieve it. They have been trying to achieve it since the late 1800s, and it is ongoing. And what we see in the West Bank, what we see in terms of laws that are being discussed within the Israeli parliament or the Knesset, are a very clear evidence on how this entire to actually achieve that goal. So yes, I think it's this period now, despite the horrific situation and despite the pain, I think it was necessary for the people to also see very clearly that this project is not an Israeli project only. It's an actual alliance between Israel colonial project and the United States support, and it would never have been in that scale if the United States were not that involved. I mean, they send military aid, including military machinery, to the region. So this is a war between Palestinians and the West in general. So I think people who are seeing that now can never deny their government's complicity. And I think it's really time for them to think, do I want to pay my tax money to support such atrocities and the ethnic cleansing of another people? Because if I allow that to happen with my tax money, how would I not then think that this government will also come to an extent and be brutalizing and be violating my own rights? And this takes me, if you allow me, in that context, what we're seeing in Europe is extremely interesting in the sense that this what is happening in Palestine is starting to be reflected in European countries. I mean, who would have imagined that Germany would actually ban a certain flag? Who would think that France would ban certain colors? This is what is happening in Palestine, is now being reflected on the rights of the citizens of Europeans in Europe. That is interesting in the sense we never thought that the occupation in Palestine will be reflected on liberties and rights of Europeans in their own countries. So let's take a minute and think about this, and also to people in their countries. This is exactly what happens when your governments are supporting colonial powers. And that is an alarm. that is an alarm to every single citizen around the world that would want to live a free life.
Very fascinating take right there. I think that the Iraq war was also a litmus test for the European and American powers, because after 9/11, you saw a massive amount of surveillance infrastructure being set up. You saw the infringement of personal privacy, emails being read, SMSs. You saw the infrastructure of colonization and empire being rolled out against the very people that enjoyed the luxuries and privileges of empire, of colonial projects and entities like Israel, like the British Empire, like the American NATO nexus. In the Iraq war, in the Afghan war, and by extension today in Gaza right now, this is not just the slaughter of those innocent people. It is not the world community, the global community, which we'll get to what this global community is, because apparently this global community is just 1 billion people. The governments of about 1 billion people are the global community. The rest of us, the 6 or 7 billion, were not part of the global community. But it's them not waging war against a state. It's them waging war against free people. You saw it in Afghanistan. You saw it in Iraq. You see it in Gaza right now. We all have a front row seat to the slaughter in Gaza. But what about the West Bank, where you're from? There's an absolute media silence about the kind of violence that is being conducted by the IDF, by the police, by the settlers who are on paper civilians, which also begs the question, what is an Israeli civilian? I mean, you have to participate in the military, you have to believe in Zionism enough, in settler colonialism enough to move away from Brooklyn or wherever you're coming from, and then, take over somebody's house. But I digress. My point is, the violence in the West Bank, everybody's silent about it. What do you have on ground? What are the facts and figures right now? And has it gotten worse since the 7th of October?
Yes. Well, one thing that is important to mention here is that it is important to look at what is happening in Gaza today as a war against Palestinians. It is not just a war against. Important because
Sorry, you got
the
cut
Israeli
off there.
colonial.
You got cut off there.
Okay, so should I repeat?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so one thing I think is important to mention here is that what is happening today is a war against Palestinians. It is not a war against Gazans. It is not a war against West Bankers. It is a war against Palestinians, which is just a continuation of the colonization practices that have been going on for the past 75 years. And why is this very important to consolidate and to actually focus on is because what the colonial power of Israel has been doing is to try to fragment the Palestinians into different groups and into different regions and into different even cultures and different and the division of Palestinians and the fragmentation to make it easier for them to practice their colonial practices and regulations and goals and projects. So yes, what is happening in Gaza is definitely part of what is happening in entire Palestine and against Palestinians. What is happening in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, and in Palestine 1948, so basically in the northern part of historical Palestine, is extremely dangerous. There are over 7 communities similar to communities of Masafir Yatta who have actually been evacuated, who have actually been ethnically cleansed since the 7th of October until today. So they are using the momentum and the attack and the focus on Gaza to actually expedite the ethnic cleansing and the colonization of more land and the displacement of Palestinians from several communities. So over 7 communities have been actually displaced, and raids are continuous to Nablus, Jenin, Tul Karim, the Jordan Valley, raids almost on daily basis. And when we talk about raids, it is heavy machinery, including tanks, including, of course, soldiers on the ground that are raiding into cities and refugee camps, also in Ramallah. And usually those raids happen at dawn. Of course, the intention is to scare people and children and the communities, so terrorizing them. And then there are accompanied by shoot to kill policy and mass arrests. So this is also happening in the West Bank. Another series of attacks are in Jerusalem. There has been, and also in areas 1948, the mass arrests of people for their interaction on social media, for a post on social media. There is a huge crackdown on the movements virtually of any single Palestinian that shows any kind any signal towards what is happening in Gaza, or support to the people, or raising the Palestinian flag, posting anything on social media. So we do sense an extreme fear among people, as well as the situation of prisoners. Now that needs a minute to actually remember that we have over 9,000 Palestinian prisoners that are political prisoners in Israeli prisons. Since the beginning of since 7th of October, the amount has increased. It has almost doubled. And the situation of the prisoners is extremely alerting. They're being tortured, beaten up. There have been 3 people that were killed in interrogation since the 7th of October until this day. When people are moved in the vehicle that usually is used for the transfer of political prisoners, something called bosta, they enter into the bosta and they see it full of blood, because what is happening is that they're beating up Palestinian political prisoners while they are shackled inside this vehicle that transfers political prisoners from one prison to another, or from the place that they were arrested to where they were supposed to be sent to. Collective punishment is happening against prisoners, lack of food, lack of water. They are using different collective punishment, torture methods, such as putting them in the sun entire day, or actually soaking them in very cold water. Now we're entering winter, so they are also using all these methods, beating them up, shooting gas tear bombs inside the rooms of prisoners. So the situation is extremely, extremely terrible. And the problem is that the entire attention is, of course, going to Gaza, and the Israeli fanatic racist government and the colonial government is using this time to actually proceed in all these measures that they're practicing now against Palestinians. Also in the West Bank and Jerusalem, there has been over 183 Palestinians killed since the 7th of October. Most of them are young Palestinians from different cities around the West Bank. And in addition to one case of a citizenship revocation of a woman who basically showed support to Palestinians and solidarity, her citizenship, an Israeli citizenship of a Palestinian person, was revoked. And these are also laws that have been introduced throughout the past 2, 3, 4 years, and that now are being loosened up by this new government to give jurisdiction to the Minister of Interior to actually go ahead and revoke citizenships. And this is another way of ethnically cleansing people, revoking their permanent residence, revoking their citizenships, and expelling them from Palestine.
This kind of cynical and clinical almost precision with which the Israeli apartheid government is operating, we expect. I mean, you expect this. I'm an outside observer. We expect them to take advantage of the war and the absolute genocide that they're committing in Gaza and to leverage that against the people in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, and also Palestinian Arabs who are Israeli citizens now, to abuse them or to completely, dispossess them of their citizenship. We expect all of this. As somebody who's an observer from the outside, what particularly irks me is that this level of international law being violated, the UN Human Rights Charter is being violated. If anything to this scale was done in any other part of the global south, the Western and European powers would be expected to mobilize military aid and to control the situation, right? They would be expected to come in and police the situation and stop the genocide. But we see that the Western world is complicit in this genocide, either with military machinery being provided or financial aid or what have you. What about the Arab and Muslim world? You see a complete lack of empathy on the part of our regimes, whether it be Egypt, whether it be Jordan, the Gulf states. You see it in Pakistan over here. You see it in Turkey. There's posturing everywhere, a statement here, a discussion over there, a rally here, some sort of, we're gonna send back the Israeli ambassador, we're gonna pull back our mission from Israel, something to that is the maximum. Why is it there's no discussion of mobilizing military presence in Israel? And why don't you see Egypt is a huge military presence in the Middle East, in North Africa? Jordan's has a decent military presence in the Middle East. You see the Gulf states have been exercising and stretching their muscles in Yemen, slaughtering innocent people. You see Hezbollah in Lebanon. All right, maybe they can get a pass. They've engaged some of the Israeli military. But you see the rest of the Arab and Muslim world being very, very silent in terms of mobilizing their militaries. Maybe they would have been more excited in the past. What do you think has changed?
Well, this is a very long discussion, but let's try to summarize it for your viewers. So basically, there is also a differentiation that needs to be made between the people of these countries and the governments of these countries. Unfortunately, we're talking about regimes that has a certain agenda, that has a certain agreements with the West, including, of course, especially the United States, that does not adhere to the agenda of liberation of Palestine and ending the colonization in the region, not just in Palestine. So you see the people engaging, you see the people wanting to actually calling on their governments to open the borders so that they can actually participate in the liberation of Palestine. But on the other hand, you see the forces of these countries actually have a huge crackdown on these demonstrators. So one is that difference, that these governments have a very different agenda. These are not really democratic regimes that have been, electedly, that have been democratically elected in a healthy process in the region, unfortunately. So that tells us a lot. The second is, of course, the relationship and the agreements, trade agreements and other sort of economical agreements and military agreements with the West, specifically the US, including the agreements for protection. That shift happened during the 70s with the Sadat changing, shifting from one pole to the other pole in the early 70s. And this is the continuation of this kind of political scene that we're seeing today. The third is that, unfortunately, because of the failure of the Palestinian Authority and their complicity as well in the crackdown of Palestinians, and in not being able to move forward any type of solution, any type of improvement for the Palestinian people, and the entertainment of any Palestinian rights. This also encouraged the regimes and the governments around us to be in such a position where they strive to normalize and strive to have further agreements with the Israeli occupation. So that's a very short answer into why we're saying that.
There's a very tragic history behind what you're suggesting, and it's too big to unpack completely in one discussion, and that too in like 5-10 minutes. But this was one of the most popularly asked questions by the audience, by the way. I've put them for the end, the audience questions, but since it's come up, what do Palestinians in the West Bank, what do Gazans, what do Palestinians in general think about the rest of the Arab world? And we're talking regimes here. We're talking about the behavior that the regimes have exhibited over the past 20, 30 years. And now especially with something as ridiculous as the Abraham Accords. Like, I've made the Hajj. I'll be honest with you. I've done the Hajj. So I can say now that Saudi is a CIA client state. I have no problem. I'm never going to go back now. So a lot of people feel uncomfortable with saying that the Gulf regimes, whether they be the UAE or whether it be Saudi Arabia even, and things like the Abraham Accords they were not any, considering the actual stakeholders, the Palestinian people. What do the actual Palestinian people think about? Let's do country by country. What do you think about the regime in Egypt? You had the Muslim Brotherhood, but now you have Sisi, overrunning it on behalf of the CIA or the Western governments. What do you guys think about Egypt and the regime?
Well, I don't think I can answer
on behalf of all Palestinian people.
On behalf of all Palestinians, but definitely, I mean, what you see is a huge disappointment. And what is interesting is that before, in 20 years back, if you look at the slogans and what people were chanting, was always very much focused on the Arab world. Where is the Arab world? We need your help now, etc. Today, we're not seeing that much. And this also tells us that there is a huge disappointment. I think people do understand that these governments and that these regimes will not be supporting a liberation movement, will not be supporting the end of a colonial system, because that scares them. Anything that has to do with freedom and liberty is the enemy of dictatorship and authoritarianism.
Yeah.
So that's how the equation works, and that's not just in the Arab region; it's everywhere.
What about the Lebanese sort of militia force, Hezbollah? You see a lot of conflicting ideas about Hezbollah. What do Palestinians feel about Hezbollah?
Again,
what does this one Palestinian feel about Hezbollah?
Yeah. No, well, there is. I think Hezbollah is a very complicated matter, in the sense that Hezbollah is not a. It's a movement in Lebanon, but has also been a regional player. What has happened in Syria and their intervention in Syria is very different than their intervention in Palestine. And so that all needs to be taken into consideration. I think what people in Palestine today, if I may say in general, and that's not just Hezbollah, but also Hamas and all parties, is I think people are very clearly supporting resistance. So regardless of who is the party that is resisting or the group that is resisting, people are supporting resistance. And Palestinians, like any other people under occupation or colonization, have the right to resist, and the right to resist by all means. And this is coming from international law. Of course, with the respect of international humanitarian law and others. But because this is a question that is, becoming more and more famous now. Oh, are Palestinians now all supporters of Hamas? I don't know if people are the supporters of Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever. I think people are supporting resistance. And why is that? Is because the final 20, 30 years, especially after the signature of the Oslo Accords in the 90s, in the early 90s, the situation has just been deteriorating. The situation has been worsening, and you gave the people a peace agreement, and then what you see is an extreme deterioration on every single level. And you see a huge socioeconomical gap that is also increasing. So people just, understood that we can't be fooled anymore. And if there's any group that is going to stand up for liberation and dignity, that is what we are going to support, regardless. So I think this is the situation at the moment.
We're going to talk about the propaganda that Israel has been pushing in a bit, but before that, we should talk about Pakistan. And so, in terms of the mobilization of military, in terms of mobilization of aid, in terms of mobilization of diplomatic support, we saw the absolute failure of the OIC and the Arab League summit. They both failed completely. The four countries that abstained, that voted against oil embargoes and to forbid airspace usage, those we expected from Morocco and Saudi and the UAE and was it Kuwait, I think. But the countries that abstained, I think, was a much deeper, knife in the back of the Muslim populations, the average people of these countries. It is a really funny anecdote that I'd like to tell you. Two anecdotes that I want to tell you. Victoria Nuland, who is an American senator, a couple of weeks ago, she called Islamabad, our capital, and she forbid our state office to let a protest that was happening, led by a major religious right-wing party called the Jamaat-e-Islami, which is the equivalent of the Muslim Brotherhood. And they even arrested and detained their leader, the elected leader of that party, and his name is Al-Haq, and he even on camera said that, it was Victoria Nuland, number one. Which I find hilarious, that Victoria Nuland is a nobody senator in America, by the way. Number two, another senator from the same party went in parliament, and his name is Senator Mushtaq, and he said that if you look at Abu Ubaidah and you look at the spokespeople from Hamas, they don't have any medals on their shirts, yet they're conducting themselves with a lot of dignity in the face of oppression, and they're clearly fighting a losing battle, but they're not giving up. And it was an anecdotal, and he was sort of taunting the generals of the military leadership in the Muslim world, that these guys have received no formal training, they've never been to a military academy in their lives, they're fighting out of a tunnel system, with homemade, the Yasin 105 rocket. I don't know how interested you're in military apparatus and infrastructure, but I'm a bit of a military nerd, so they're dealing with one of the most well-equipped armies on earth, and it seems to be that they're kicking their butt. It seems to me that in a stand-up fight, the Israelis are unable to take on the Palestinian armed groups, whether it be Hamas or whether it be Islamic Jihad or whoever. Given this situation on ground, if you ask me, the 25, what is a crore? I think we're about 2.5 billion. No, how many are we? पाकिस्तान में अपना सलमान कितने हैं पाकिस्तान में लोग 22 करोड़ कितने होते हैं इंग्लिश में forgotten the English for whatever, हाँ 22 million नहीं होते हैं हम 22 billion है हम नहीं अर्थ में 8 billion है 22 billion how much is a crore? I've completely lost my train of thought. I will just, huh?
10 million एक करोड़ होता है।
हाँ,
हाँ, तो 1 करोड़ 10 मिलियन है तो 100 200 200 और 220 मिलियन।
yeah. We're about
You want
250.
to know the population of Pakistan?
Yeah,
It's 231.4 million.
sorry, the English, yani, completely, it escaped me. We're about 240 million odd people. I think we stand by Pakistan, by Palestine completely. But our state, and it is similar to the situation in all these states. I think you have a personal anecdotal experience with Pakistan. Why don't you tell the audience, and what do you feel about Pakistan?
Yeah, I lived in Pakistan when I was very young, and my memories of Pakistan, I was both in Karachi and in Islamabad, are very very nice. Well, I was a child, and I remember there were many places to visit. It was extremely green, and the school I went to was very interesting. So much. I even learned a song in Urdu that I can't remember now. So it was very interesting. But yes, what you said before is definitely. I mean, Palestinians that are living in Palestine today are about 4 million. So it's almost one street in Pakistan. And it's I think what matters is that the connection you see between Palestinians and that land is something that is extremely undefeatable. And I think this is what the Israeli Zionist movement did not understand, especially when one of their leaders, Golda Meir, said that the old will die and the young will forget. That is what is proven to be the exact opposite. Actually, the younger generation is more connected to Palestine than the older one. So today we see in exile generation, the third generation, the fourth generation, even in some places, and they are so eager to be part of the liberation process. They are so eager to learn. They're so eager to connect. And this is something that is very, very cherishable in the Palestinian cause and in the Palestinian identity, that it has to do with the injustices that the Palestinians are living. And this is what gives a lot of hope as well, is that despite this, I mean, there's nowhere else for Palestinians to go. The colonizer has, in most cases, a lot of ties and relationships with many different other countries, whether it is based on religion or it is based on ethnicity or it is based on nationality. But in Palestine, that is not the case. The people who are indigenous to the land have been living there for so long, and they have the relationship with this country and also to the neighboring countries, because let's face it, the Levant, which is Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine, they just less than 100 years was this region all interconnected. It was not divided into states. It's actually the British colonizer who infringed that kind of borders and fragmentation among these countries. So yeah, I think despite the fact that we're very few, I think the persistence and resilience is very huge and very high. And the Palestinians refuse to succumb. The Palestinians refuse to give in. And this is the most dangerous weapon that the Palestinians have, the determination to actually live in freedom and liberty and dignity.
We would be remiss if we didn't commend the bravery of the Palestinian people. But more so than that, as a woman, we would be remiss if we didn't ask you about the dignity of the Palestinian women. The young men who are resisting in Gaza, who are protesting in the West Bank, who are fighting however they can in Israel, against Israel, they're doing the fighting. but the women, the dignity with which they're conducting themselves, the fact that they're not running away from the fight, the fact that the boys are in the bunkers, yani fighting the Israelis, popping out from here and there, but the women are in the houses. They're organizing in the hospitals, and they're taking care of the sick and the injured. Um, the dignity of the Palestinian women and specifically of the Gazan women is unparalleled. The images that we see coming out of Gaza and we see coming out of Palestine in general, what is it that is driving them to do this? It's not religion. It's you see Christian Arabs as well. You see Muslim Arabs. It could be religion, sure, but what is it specifically about Palestinian women that wherever they are in the world, they keep fighting, they keep struggling, they keep clawing at the oppressors, and they're not willing to give up? And we see one of the icons of this, Ahad Tamimi. She's been arrested recently, unfortunately. And we hope that she can be out of the occupiers' jails very soon and back on the street where she can keep fighting the occupier. What is it that drives Palestinian women to fight even harder than the men?
Well, I think it's not very much different to what I said earlier about the relationship between the fight for liberation and Palestinians in general. Now, of course, because usually in wars, in conflicts, in genocides, most of the specifically when there is fighting, women end up being the caregivers of the family. They are the ones that so for example, we have about almost 8,000 Palestinian political prisoners, among which 70 women or 74 women are 74 of these prisoners are women. The rest are men. So who is then going to be taking care of, the family, the parents, the sister, the brother, etc.? It is the woman. So the Palestinian woman has been taking on this lead role in actually being the leader of the entire family for so many years. In addition to, of course, the organizations that have been based on the women movements that are inside Palestine, that have been part of the entire bigger struggle and the entire bigger cause for liberation. It has never been inseparable than the bigger cause. And I think the atrocities is also so huge that, of course, the responsibility needs to be distributed among Palestinians, regardless if they are, women or men. But yes, it is a struggle that is ongoing, and women have learned to be also very resilient. This does not mean that the struggle of women in general in relation to other patriarchal structures in Palestine is not there. It is definitely there, but this is definitely also what adds up to the oppression that women are facing in Palestine. That not only are they facing the oppression of the colonizer, but of course there are different other circles of oppression that women are also facing in Palestine as a conservative society that does not necessarily treats women as equal as men, unfortunately. So that's another struggle that women also needs to be part of and is part of.
The deafening silence of Western feminists. How does it feel to see your fellow women from across the world who you might stand with on voter rights, on the right to equal access in the workforce? You might stand alongside with them on all these issues. But when it came down to your people, the absolute deafening silence from Western feminists, how does that feel as a Palestinian woman?
Well, It falls, actually, to be honest, I haven't been really following on what kinds of statements are specific groups getting out, and that is because we are so much overwhelmed with the crisis and the genocide that is taking place today. But that wouldn't surprise me in the sense of this is all part of the system, and a person being a feminist is fighting for the same causes that we believe in, which is decolonization and liberation. So, as you called it, Western feminism, then it will also maybe in many places be the same as the Western mentality and the supremacist colonial white mentality. That has never acknowledged the liberties and freedom of other people, specifically the people of the global South. So it comes very much in line with their general
disposition towards to our humanity.
Position. Yes.
Yeah.
So
some audience questions for you. People have asked very innocent questions, and I've condensed them into groupings. Humanitarian efforts. People have asked from where do I send my money? Who do I send my money to? How can I adopt Palestinian children who've been orphaned? To this level, they're very serious about this. What is the efficacy of the charity that we've been sending, of the aid, the financial, however, whatever we've been sending? So let's wrap this up in one big question of what is the efficacy of humanitarian aid, and if one was to participate, where do we send our money? How do we become a part of it?
Yeah, well, I think it is very important that several things can be done by Pakistani people. So the first is always get information and educate yourselves, and please be in touch with Palestinians to collaborate on giving our voices a space so that the people would learn, engage, and that we can strategize together on what can be done in this fight for liberation. So always try to be as up to date as possible. I will be sending you some sources of information that people can look up and use as sources, definitely. Second, believe that every single step an individual takes actually matters. Don't you ever go into the pattern, oh, what would it mean if I go and do this or that? That's not true. If every person is going to think that their own individual action does not matter, then no one will do anything. So believe me, it does. Even if you just try to educate the people around you, even if you consider yourself, after getting the knowledge you need, to be the ambassador of Palestine, then please do. Now, if you have more energy and you have more power and you have more support to engage in collective actions, whether you are in a university, whether you are at school, there are many, many things that you can do under the umbrella of awareness raising and also getting to involve people and engage people. In relation to within Pakistan and the relationship with the governments, which are the decision makers that actually also matter, the people's voices do matter. And it is very important to engage with different parties, with different parliamentarians, with different government officials on the relationship with Palestine, the relationship in trade and economy, and how can you push to advance Pakistan to take decisions and encourage other states in your neighboring countries to also take similar decisions in, for example, cutting all ties with Israel, including any trade agreements, any economical agreements. And this definitely can be done by Pakistan, such a big country with it's a nuclear state. So it is very important that also Pakistan is part, specifically also in the Islamic as well, collective and the Islamic League, that it has its voice out there and very, very much heard. Now, in relation to the humanitarian support, yes, there are different groups that are receiving donations, and I can also send you names of organizations. But also, it is important to domestically look into any civil society organizations that are working on Palestine, whether they are Palestinians or Pakistanis or whatever, and try to support them as well, so that their work is efficient and they increase their outreach. So you think both on domestic level and what can be done to support organizations that actually work on advocacy for Palestine, so that they can be the coordinators of the work that you do. And second is the humanitarian aid that can be sent to different organizations and different families in Palestine that is being channeled through these organizations. I will send you the list. And the third is that the civil society in Palestine, which, for example, I belong to, has after 7th of October, and this is also a very interesting turn, not very surprising, but extremely cunning, is that the European states that were our partners decided to review the relationships with us and freezing the funding that we receive. So that what they want to basically do is to cut us off and to stop us and silence us and marginalize our work. And this comes amidst the genocide that is taking place against our people. So imagine them sending us all these emails, calling for further answering of several questions. Most likely, like they feel like an interrogation questions. And if we don't answer those questions within a certain time, they will cut the funding. And this is very, very, of course, disrespectful, distressing, and shows the real supremacy of these states. And this is something that we now need to move away from. So also, if there are certain people that would like to also support the work that civil society is doing, because unfortunately, if we don't do this work, there's no one else doing it. It's not like the Palestinian Authority is in any way filling in the gaps on advocacy and diplomacy, unfortunately. So that is a third way of getting into, especially if there are well-off Pakistanis that would like to support the Palestinian cause on different levels. So politically, economically, humanitarian-wise, and also strategically within Pakistan.
Just to clarify a few things, our nuclear weapons are mostly for display, and they're not to be used. That's an inside Pakistan joke. Our audience will get it. The second is there are organizations on ground, such as Al-Khidmat and the Jamaat Islami, the Muslim Brotherhood equivalent. They do a lot of charity and aid work. As far as the civil sort of the advocacy and lobbying, we don't have a lot of that. See, the Pakistani mindset in that liberal arts, lobbying, political science, philosophy, these things are sort of, we want to be engineers and doctors, and we want our zakat and our charity to be spent on water coolers and food banks, and that's about it. But inshallah, we're going to change the culture. We're going to organize some webinars and some talks with Rula and your colleagues and other people, inshallah. We're going to be screening some documentaries in Pakistani universities. So, inshallah, this momentum, we won't let it stop. And this is it. This is the watershed moment. This is Palestine will be free now, and if not now, then never. Honestly, this is it. We have to continue the fight this time. Our elders maybe didn't follow it through. We have the tools. We have the internet. We're more interconnected than ever before. Billions of people online, inshallah. And we'll be able to coordinate this effort, and whatever links you provide, we will also provide the people with, and we'll start a two-way communication channel, inshallah, between the Pakistani people and the Palestinian people all over the world. The second thing that has become a big bone of contention in Pakistan is the BDS movement. Now in Pakistan, Unilever, PepsiCo, McDonald's, HP and Nestle, but specifically McDonald's, have become the big battleground. Alhamdulillah, you see that they're empty now. The McDonald's is, even though they're local franchises, and we understand that we're not idiots, they're mostly empty. People are avoiding a lot of big Western food chains and consumer goods that people can immediately understand, like Unilever shampoos and soaps and what have you. And then Nestle. Nestle was a big water provider in the Pakistani market. People are avoiding their water services and other whatever junk they were offering. There's a big debate, even amongst the religious class as well as the social sort of commentator, armchair intellectual types, who are suggesting that the BDS is ineffective and it is only going to damage our own economy and jobs, and people who are carrying water for the Israeli regime and Western dominance, basically, who are not willing to admit that they would like to sign off on the genocide of the Palestinian people and wouldn't like to inconvenience themselves because they like Kit Kat bars or, whatever else garbage that Nestle has to offer. What do you think about boycotting, divestment? Because we don't have any overt trade deals with Israel. Pakistan doesn't have any declared trade deals. I mean, backdoor channeling, sure. Corporations that work via Europe and America, sure, we trade with them, but no direct. We've only had one mission in the history of Pakistan that went, and it was American Pakistanis who were neocon weirdo types, who, one of them, by the way, gave a speech right now yesterday in Washington DC addressing that the pro-Israel march. It was ridiculous. Some auntie ji who had no idea where she was. She tried to relate how the Palestinian people and the Muslims of Pakistan have, some common heritage or some nonsense like that, some Abrahamic nonsense. So we don't have any overt relationship with Israel, but covertly and through these corporations, what do you feel about it as a Palestinian? Would you like the spiritual sort of metaphysical impact that it has on young people like yourself, that we would sit here as your brothers and sisters in liberation? Like we're liberated from the British Empire, right? And the Israel is an extension of the British Empire and the American Empire. Afghan war, a million people died there, but a few 100,000 people died here as well. It was ridiculous. So, given our experiences with imperialism, what would you feel metaphysically, the spiritual implications of blackening your soul like that, and then also the practical? Do you think it works? Do you think it's something that the Pakistan should pursue? The people should push the government and the corporations further?
Yes. Definitely. The BDS has one of the biggest Palestinian civil society coalition in Palestine, which means that there is the biggest agreement among Palestinians, civil society organizations, that this is a way forward. It is pretty easy for individuals to actually adopt, and there's the B, which is the boycott. Now, what we are striving for today is the sanctions. And this is what we are calling for. And we have started to see some governments actually calling on sanctions. So we definitely think that the liberation of Palestine will need every single method that we have. And BDS is one of those methods. And speaking out is another method. Resistance on every level is very much needed. And everyone resists in the way that they feel possible for them, and this is what we call for now. BDS has had so many great achievements, and it has actually caused the Israeli regime to lose billions of dollars in agreements with different countries and different companies around the world. So yes, it does work, and it is one of the biggest enemies. Netanyahu even called it one of the existential threats is BDS, because it is so effective in the sense of actually targeting those companies, targeting figures that are that are in support of Israel and the regime of Israel, ending twinship relationships with with cities, ending relationships with universities that are, for example, doing a lot of research on high-tech development and technologies that are actually being experimented on Palestinians to then become this top pioneer technology that the Israeli regime is very much known for. So yes, BDS is definitely something that we think is important for people to understand and to practice.
The next one is genuinely offensive, so I'm warning you in advance. There is a group of people here, armchair intellectuals again, who are dumb enough to believe that the UN mission, the UN plan, the UN partition plan, that the Palestinian people should have accepted the UN partition plan in 1948. And in hindsight, Israel would have stopped its expansion and would have stopped the violence against the Palestinian people. So how do you feel about that as a Palestinian, that somebody could be that intellectually bankrupt and morally completely devoid of any compass in Pakistan, which is thousands of miles away, and they could think that the UN mission plan was something that they should have accepted in 1948, the Palestinian people?
Well, I mean, we hope that people would get more information and read more to be able to assess and take informed decisions. There are no stupid questions. There are no. It is not offending when it comes from a genuine actually question. So. Not at all. The Palestinians did not agree to it because it was basically dividing Palestine into 49% for the Palestinian majority population and 52% for the Jewish immigration. And this was not something that they accepted back then. But in the argument of the people who says that if we accepted that, then they would have stopped, well, the very clear evidence is that they never stopped. So in the Oslo agreements, Palestinians agreed to 22%, not 49%. What they agreed to in Oslo is 22% of entire historic Palestine. And even that is today in the West Bank, which is 22% of entire historical Palestine, 11% is not in the access of Palestinians because it is either settlements or it is military outposts or it is illegal settlements or they are industrial settlements or agricultural settlements, in addition to the annexation apartheid wall. So remove 11% from the 22%, you will have 11%. And even in that, 60% of the 11% is a sea area, which means that there is zero control for the Palestinian Authority in that area. So meaning there is no such thing as a Palestinian autonomy or a Palestinian Authority on the land of what is supposed to become a Palestinian state. So the answer is, unfortunately, it is not about Palestinians agreeing or not agreeing. This is a liberation cause from colonialism. The colonialist never stops. The colonialists, as you all know and have experienced, they are always in hunger for more. And the greediness is definitely extremely high. The power is to expropriate more land, to ethnically cleanse more people, to continue to control and enjoy the resources, the stolen resources of Palestine. We don't have one single resource of water, for example, even in the West Bank. We get our water from Israel, basically. We pay for our stolen water to be provided to us. The same thing with fuel, the same thing with electricity, etc. When you roam around in the West Bank, you will find that most of the water resources, there is a water pump, and it's all besieged with fences because it is under the control of the military. So that is in the, for example, a land of a Palestinian, and then you see that source of water entirely controlled, and this water goes to the settlements close by, and Palestinians do not have access to it, but they actually have to buy it. So this is what the situation looks like. So no, it has nothing to do with our acceptance of a solution that was imposed on us by the colonial powers. Because even if we did that, we are seeing the results today very, very clearly.
Unfortunately, that is the reality of a colonial power, and I think what is unique to this colonial power is that Zionism is a very toxic ideology which has infected the minds of all of these immigrants and has enamored people across the world, Western people primarily. It gives a religious flavor to this occupation that allows for any sort of immoral activity. You see that Netanyahu recently compared the Palestinian people to the Amalek, which is a biblical people that were commanded by God in the Bible. The Jews were commanded by God in the Bible to slaughter these people en masse with their children and women included. So we can see how, these would be the ISIS equivalents of religious zealots. I had Dan Cohen on, who is an American Jewish journalist. He described them as a cosmopolitan ISIS, with cafes and and nightclubs and LGBT acceptance, but that's what they are. They're a religious extremist ideology, and they will not stop until what they have as Greater Israel, their obsession with it, and until they have that territory, they won't stop, until someone puts a stop to them. We talked before the interview as well. You and I are both convinced that this is the watershed moment. This is the moment in history where everybody's going to look back and remember which state regime stood where. Do you think that Muslim countries will be the regimes in Muslim countries and the Arab world will be able to hold off the pressure that they're facing from their populations anymore? In the exchange of maintaining a relationship with Israel, maintaining trade agreements, and the absolute pressure that they're facing from their population, how long do you think they can hold off this balancing act?
We hope not long. This is very important. That's why we're saying that it is very, very important that the people actually continue on moving. Do not get normalized to what is happening in Palestine. This cannot be allowed. We cannot think about it as any other day. Imagine the bombardment has not stopped for one single day. It is a catastrophe that is happening in Gaza. It is a mass murder. And it's very, very important that we interact in any way that is possible to actually change the situation and never allow this to happen again and stop it. That's why the ceasefire is definitely one of the main goals. There is going to be a convoy to Cairo, and then from Cairo, hopefully to Rafah, from people from all over the world to put pressure on the demand of ceasefire and the entrance of humanitarian aid to the entire Gaza. And this is now happening because the people are actually thinking that, you know what, we need to be there. The countries, the states are not going to do anything. So we actually need to take things in our hands and to take initiative to the extreme that people actually are now willing to enter into Gaza with their own selves so that this would stop. So this is very important, and this kind of solidarity is very, very beautiful and important. And yes, the more pressure comes from the people. Of course, governments are not very stupid to neglect and to totally disregard this entire movement. They they can't dare to, especially if they increase in numbers and they are louder in voices and in movements, and maybe more creative in sit-ins and stuff like that. I think I think the governments will have to take a more serious step towards ending this horrific situation that is ongoing today in Gaza and have been for the past 43 days.
There's a big protest in Lahore, which is the city that we're based out of. It's a major city in Pakistan. And we hope that it will be a pointed protest with actual tangible demands from the state, inshallah. Rula, you've been very patient with my line of questioning. You've been very effective and helpful in communicating for the Palestinian cause. We hope to see more of you. We're trying to organize webinars, screenings for films, trying to educate students, professionals, anyone and everyone who wants to participate in any sort of activism for the Palestinian cause. Inshallah, this momentum will not slow down, not this time. Where can the people follow you, your work? And we would like to see more of you on social media as well, by the way, because you barely exist. But where can they follow you and your work and your colleagues and all these things?
So our social media interface is called Rabet by PIPD, RABET by PIPD, and I will send it to you so you can put it out online. I personally am not on social media, but I'm happy to join you in any call, webinars, even if people want to reach out with bundled questions that you can put together every week. Then maybe I can answer them, whether in writing or in a call. And as we discussed earlier, I would be very, very honored to come to Pakistan, mainly because of the nostalgia I have for my childhood, but also to be engaging with the people that actually matter, and the people that we have so much in common. So I really look forward to that. I will definitely be so honored to do that as well. And I will send you some links to sources of information where I invite your listeners and viewers to actually follow. I encourage them to learn more again. And also I'll be sending you a list of different films that can be shown, screened, and maybe we can even contact the directors of these films so that they can also be guests and talk about the different productions.
Inshallah, we will organize all of these things in the near future. However, there is one leftover audience question that I completely ignored, and I think you would be interested in answering this one. In the course of this conflict, we have developed an online relationship with some actual Zionists from Israel and New York. This guy, I would like to call him more than anything my friend. We've developed a friendship over the last 4 weeks. I'll just name him as Zach. He's a Jewish individual based out of New York, and he describes himself as a on the fence Zionist. And he's not a full Zionist. He's a half-baked Zionist. He asked you 2 questions. I asked him specifically if you had any questions for Rula. I gave him a little introduction to you. And he said, number 1, are you unable to get back because of Israel and the Israeli government? And you answered that earlier. And number 2, if you're a lawyer, that thing I have described to him, that you're a lawyer, do you think that Hamas using hospitals and schools as headquarters or launching points, would you consider them legitimate targets for the IDF, both legally and morally? I think this guy is a sweet guy, but it's absolutely a stupid question. I'm trying to convince him all the time.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would say that this is the most absurd comment. This is very unacceptable to disregard the killing of more than 12,000 Palestinians, including more than 70% are women and children. and to try in any way to justify the killing of these people. So that shows exactly a very supremacist and Zionist mentality. There is no way that we can justify the killing, whether it is law or otherwise. The killing of civilians in that severe and large scale intentional alleged genocide. So that is one. Two, we are very much now saturated by the falsification of information that comes out from Israeli occupation and colonial forces. And that is very, very important to remember all the time, that they have lied about a Nakba, they have lied about 67, they have lied about the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh. And today we are seeing all the unfolding information coming that all of these were lies. And don't you ever blame the colonized for the violence of the colonizer. That is extremely important to acknowledge and to remember. The violence that comes from the colonized is only in response to the ongoing and systematic violence that is being exposed upon them by the colonizer. So these kinds of questions is only aiming to dehumanize Palestinians and to dehumanize the entire humanity and existence and dignity of Palestinians that we immediately and absolutely refuse. So to all these questions and to all these people that continue to express and to exercise their white supremacist colonial thoughts on our people and to infringe their absolute arrogance to the killing and to the dignity and to the lives of Palestinians, I say this: don't you ever blame the violence of the colonized on of the colonizer on the colonized. That is very, very, very important.
Zach, if you're listening, you know that you and I are buddies now. I think that was an appropriate answer. I hope that you can come up with better questions next time, buddy. No, that was beautifully put. Thank you. I wouldn't want to be a colonizer trying to debate you about these things. That was aptly put as a lawyer and as a human being. Thank you for your patience. All I can say is fi amanillah, and it was lovely seeing you. It was lovely speaking with you.
Thank you very much. Fi amanillah. Thanks.
Thanks.